Jesse, is that you? Okay, it just said someone, so.
All right, we'll go ahead and get this meeting called to order of the USD 431 School Board. Roll call, we have Jesse available by Zoom and Julie is absent tonight. And then approval of the agenda. We did make just a couple of switcheroos on here. So under item 9, consideration of district personnel, we're moving resignations to B, nominations to C, and then the superintendent evaluation will be moved to D. And then we're removing line item number 10, negotiations, as there are none at this time.
I'm going to adopt the agenda as presented.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to adopt the agenda as presented. All in favor?
Yes.
Okay, passes 6-0.
He has modified.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Sorry, I didn't.
That's okay. All right, opportunity for visitors. Well, we have a whole room full of people tonight. Thank you guys for coming. I won't make you do a speech, I promise. Okay, item 5, consent agenda. You have the minutes of the 13th of January meeting, cash summary report, check journal, activities account, and donation. You want to talk a minute about the donation?
So just, small donation to help offset some of the cost for going to Real Men Sing at Bethany College. And then also on the cash summary report, special education special education primarily is a fund that is funded out of the general education as well as with state aid. So that will be a transfer that will be made, and we've paid our, third quarter transfer to the special ed co-op. And then the next line down as well, can't remember which one that is off the top of my head. Vocational, again, that's one that we get money into the general account and then that's transferred into the vocational fund. So each month we have to transfer money into that and replenish the salaries that we pay out of the vocational fund. Any of the federal funds in 07, 58, 59, those are negative because we spend those out and then we request that money. So those are okay to be in the negative.
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second. Been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. All in favor?
Yes.
Passes 6-0. Okay, move on to item 6, old business. December 2024 KASB policy updates.
So you've had these policies for 2 months. This is the second read. Typically we don't go through and read these line by line. I just want to touch base on a few of them that have been, changed and modified. Starting on the first page, BDAA, developing, adopting, amending, and repealing board policies, technical grammatical change for clarity and ease of use, nothing major there. Organizational chart. Previous version of the policy anticipated that the district's organization chart would be embedded within policy CC, which is cumbersome. And so these change that would enable the board to adopt an organizational chart as they feel best suits them. CD, it actually says, moves on to see description under CG, administrative personnel. Again, CG, throughout periodic review of model policy, it is determined that the language in policy CD and CGI could be added to policy CG for more comprehensive and a cohesive policy. CGI, it adds that C under CG, administrative personnel, so it's tying those policies together. C and A, title revision and technical grammatical changes for clarity, so no major changes there. DE, fraud prevention and investigation, language was added to refer policy KN and policy DFAC to specify the relevant policies that outline the complaint procedure to be used in certain circumstances. DFAC, federal physical compliance, significant revisions to the federal uniform grant guidance. Regulations were issued in April of 24 and became effective in October of 24. Due to these changes, this policy is accompanying the forms. DFAC grant sub-receipt monitoring procedures, procurement of federal programs, DFAC allowability of costs, DFAC cash management, DFAC type of costs. These are all related to federal funds and getting rid of property after certain period of time. DFH, fundraising activities. This one I dug pretty deep into to make sure that any of the policy did not go against or contradict any of the information that we've put together as the procedures that we typically use for fundraising, and this does not go against anything that we're currently doing. So it actually, just gives a little bit more clarification to the overall fundraising activities that can be done. GAE, complaints, technical grammatical change for clarity and ease of use. ICA, pilot projects, so any pilot projects that we might want to do. This policy was revised to outline the requirements under the Protection of Public Rights Amendment and the Student Data Privacy Act as related to surveys administered to students. This was a state statute that changed a couple years ago, and this policy aligns with that state statute. IDACA, the policy was amended to clarify the district's responsibility to provide FAPE, which is free appropriate public education, to eligible students in accordance with the state and federal law in relationship to special education services. JGFGA, stock supply of emergency medication. This policy was drafted to reflect the change in state law that allows for districts to keep a stock supply of epinephrine and albuterol in accordance with guidance outlined in the policy. As I was reading this one of the things that I want to make clear is that this is not necessarily a practice that we're going to have. The policy allows us to have those medicines on hand, and we have a procedure for the use of Narcan, and we also provide training to staff that would do that. We don't have anything in place right now for training to administer albuterol or epinephrine, so we would put those into place as a practice before we would actually utilize this policy. Does that one make sense? That was a concern of mine when I was reading this. We're not just going to go around handing out inhalers to everybody because we haven't trained people to do that. So
is that just getting somebody from the hospital to come down and train?
Yeah. And a lot of the service centers will put together some trainings as well. And then that way we have documentation that somebody's done a training, or we can have somebody from the hospital do that.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Do we have anything in place right now for students who have allergies and carry EpiPens that if they are unable to administer it themselves?
Yes.
There's somebody in each building at least trained to do that?
We actually have a paper that they fill out to administer their own. We actually have that in place already.
But if they're incapacitated and can't do it?
We typically will have a document in place that says that they would be able to be administered that.
Once in our CPR training as well,
right.
all of us receive.
Okay. That's, yeah.
So, and then that goes to, or those of us that carry an inhaler, JGFGBA, a little bit long, student self-administration of medications. This policy was revised to clearly delineate between a self-administration of epinephrine and inhalers by students, which is outlined in the state statute, and the self-administration of over-the-counter medication by students is authorized by parents. So we have enrollment processes that allow us to do that as well, to have that self-administration. Then KN, it goes into the general revisions were made to the policy, as well as making specific changes to formal complaint timelines and complainants against the superintendent. So everything that I've read through aligns with what we currently have, policies and procedures that we currently adhere to. And so I would recommend that we approve all of these policies as presented.
I move to approve the updates to the board policies as presented.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor? Jesse? Are you with us?
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's a 6-0. Thank you. Okay, item B, daycare information.
So this afternoon, I received an email from Sarah Arnberger giving an update to the progress of the daycare. Went ahead and put that on the that email on the board agenda as soon as I received that.
And this is all in that small footprint at Roosevelt.
Correct. So really, the things that have been completed have all been either on paper or just on a map somewhere. Nothing has changed from the time that we demolished the modular that was there. I do want to point out, one of the things that has been a major concern is, number one, under current challenges, is the bid estimates for the project has come in higher on the cost than the first center. Secondly, Recent communication from grant committees has indicated that the federal grant funding for this project may be impacted by a freeze in the federal grant dollars. You know, so many of the federal grant dollars have not been frozen, which includes more specific things to us as education, but some of the other grants have. And so the next step that they feel like that is going to be the next steps for that moving forward is to actually go into explore community fundraising efforts, you know, to offset some of the grants. I know there's been some concern by the board that may not be the direction that you all would want to go. So I would be fine in going to her and saying that maybe we as USD 431 need to reevaluate our role in daycare in Hoisington at this point in time in the partnership with ABCC, and see if there's maybe a different route that we as USD 431 have in daycare in Hoisington, or how else we can support daycare in Hoisington.
Yeah, I mean, I just, with all these issues, challenges, I don't have a good feeling about it. And with the way that Great Bend, you know, they're not as successful, I think, as they thought they would be.
Mm-hmm.
I just
With
have
the
doubts
square
about this.
footage, with the square footage getting cut and the cost of
Mhm.
Well, and we honestly will have no say in hiring, firing, anything. They literally are just gonna be using our land. So I have some concerns about that as well. Because we will have no say in what happens with this daycare once they start. So you know, and if we're gonna involve our community and ask them for the help, I would feel more comfortable if we are spearheading it ourselves as a board. So we're not, I don't want people to think that we are squashing the daycare.
Right.
It is very much a need. We know it's a need. We just need to figure out what the best way for our community and our district to make this happen.
Right, yeah. I don't think this partnership.
Right, and I'm not sure that this partnership is gonna be the best option for us at this point.
Question though on these expenditures to date. Would we be responsible for any of that with us backing out?
There's a possibility that there would be some of our responsibility for some of this. So,
Okay.
So I will talk to Sarah and the ABCC board and see you know what type of responsibility we may need. We don't have a formal contract with them. That was never approved by ABCC. We presented it to them, and that was never taken to them or signed off on. So, but I mean, the expense did happen on our property in that idea of moving forward with that. So there may be some financial responsibility that we would take on for that.
Which would have needed to be done.
It would have been.
Right. It would have been needed to
Right.
be done and probably to make, I mean, if let's just say we would have done all of the work, maybe one of those items would not have had to been done. We could have used the Roosevelt address, and so there wouldn't have had to been a site map. Other than that, pretty much everything else would have needed to have been done simply because you're working with the KDHE and you're working with the fire marshal, and all of the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed whenever it comes to the daycare. So we would have had to have come across most of this as well.
I guess guess we'll just leave it to have you find out what you can, additional information, and we'll bring it back to the table next month.
Okay.
Does that sound good?
Yep.
All right. Item C, option for alternative high school environment.
You want to talk some?
Yeah.
Okay. And then I also did just recently upload a kind of a price breakdown. As a PDF. Let me know if you're not seeing that. I can get you a paper copy of that. Kind of give you a better idea of revenue and expenses that we would have for that as well. So I'll let Joel present a little bit.
Patrick and I have been talking about this for the last couple of years, just because might get to the point where we're losing more money by sending kids to the Great Bend Academy as opposed to keeping them here in our district, because we pay the SDAC 100% of the FTE funding, right, for the students that we send to the academy on site there in Great Bend. So I'd say on average we probably send 8 to 10 kids, or 8 to 12 probably per school year over there. So whatever the FTE funding is, was it 5,000 per kid roughly?
Yeah, about 5,300, 5,400.
So it might be more cost efficient to actually keep them here. We'd have to staff that. Wouldn't necessarily have to be a certified personnel, but we'd have to staff it with a full-time person. We could hopefully use a room at the activity center, so no cost there. And the kids have their own Chromebooks. Would have their Chromebooks from us anyway. So, and talking with a few other schools that have alternative sites, I know Great Bend does. It's mainly for juniors and seniors that are well behind credits to graduate on time. And then some other circumstances that might put that kid into that situation as opposed to the traditional setting. So I think we probably gather, a little bit more information on specifically how it would look and how that day would run with our program over there. But just want to bring it up, and it might be more, like I said, cost efficient for us to keep them here. One hurdle too, some of the kids that we send over there don't have the means for transportation, so that would eliminate that.
So the paper that I included on the board agenda, if you're able to get to that, if not, let me know, and I do have a paper copy for you. So the 24-25 base state aid for a full-time student was $53.78. So in just looking at a full-time student, sending that full-time student to Great Bend, to the SDAC Academy, we get all of that state aid as a full-time student, but then the next year we pay that out to SDAC. So they allow us to basically just hang on to that money for a year, and then we pay that out to them the next year. So at 10 students, if we were able to maintain and keep 10 students, that would provide about $53,000. 15 students would generate $80,000. So, not looking at growing this much bigger than that, just simply because of the space that's available there. We're not looking at a virtual school. We're not looking at anything other than just servicing the students that we currently are using alternative ed placements in other places. So to help try to take down some of the barriers for some of the students that we do have that struggle. Expenses, if we just looked at a $15 per age or per hour for wages for an aide, you can see the expense there. Full-time employees get, the $742 towards their health insurance for 12 months. That expense is there, and then the total. And then 2 aides, because we did talk about last month, the consideration of having 2 people over there for safety and protection, having that there as well. And you can kind of compare if we could generate the 15 students or somewhere between 10 and 15 students of full-time equivalent aid, we would be able to break even on that. Some of the other costs that would come into that, about $2,600 per month is what we paid just this past December in paying for the program that we actually use for students to in Diane's class that we have students, credit recovery. So that would be probably a per month expense, that $2,600, and then as Joel's talked about, we send that money to the SDAC Academy or to SDAC. We get it the first year and then we send it the next year. Our monthly payment on this year is $2,350 per month, and that's for last year's students that we sent to the academy. Does that make sense? Because that's a little confusing. I didn't understand it whenever we first started. But the use of the funds, we would definitely use K-12 at-risk funds. This is a perfect example of how we can use that. And so we get those funds, we transfer those from the general fund into at-risk funds, and we have very specific things that we can spend that on. And this is a prime example of something that we can spend that on. Even if we're not generating the full, let's say the full 15 students of full-time aid, some of the students may be part-time, we can still be able to use the at-risk funds even if we're, maybe need to balance it out a little bit.
Would that put the balance of that fund at risk? I mean, do we have plenty of?
We've got plenty of money in that fund. So, and the first year that we got the at-risk funding, I did not spend hardly any of it. And every year since then, I've not been able to find enough stuff to spend it on, except for each year I increase how much we spend it on salaries, because that is our biggest expense. So I'm not worried about. I mean, we're looking at 1.3 million that we put in there every year, and so I'm not worried that is going to be the one thing that draws that into the negative.
Is that where the funds are already coming from to pay for the curriculum right now?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. That's specifically where we pay that out of.
Patrick, if we were to try this and say, in a year or two, we were like, okay, it's not something that we want to do, are we able to go back to the ASDEC co-op type thing, or?
Yeah,
I would assume.
I would assume so. I mean, they have alternative placements in multiple different communities. So, and I don't think that we're the driving force for the one in Great Bend. I mean, I think there's enough students in Great Bend that sometimes we kind of get pushed out. So I think that would still be an alternate placement that we could utilize.
Mr. Mason, has there been any trend like the last few years of like students, like just the quantity or number of that have been going to Great Bend Academy is increasing? Yeah. That was going to be my thought, if it's continuing to go up.
Yeah, and I can see that in a couple of years being the case.
Yeah.
And we definitely saw, not necessarily COVID year, like the 2021 when I first got here, but that 21-22, we probably had the most kids that we had ever had go down there. And so it's pretty well leveled off to where, like Joel said, it's about that 10 to 12 students.
Is the student to aid ratio the same as it is at the academy? Like if we're saying 2 aides for how many kids? Do we say like would 2 aides be for 10 kids, or?
I think over there they have 3 or 4 full-time employees, but they don't have just the Hoisington kids. I don't know how many people they have total, but they also have adults that are going back to school. So I couldn't tell you what the ratio is there.
Mm-hmm.
That's definitely something for us to look into.
Just to make sure,
Mm-hmm.
we can cover, and I mean, obviously you said we have the funds to probably do it, but
Yeah.
something.
But I think that's definitely I heard last month that was definitely a consideration, is making sure that we're, not only looking at, what we can do for the students, but making sure we're taking care of our adults that are over there as well.
Is this an all-day program?
Great bid. They have a contract signed, where the kids have to be there 10 hours a week. No, what was that? It was more than that. I can't remember what exact was, but they had to be there a certain amount of hours a week, and they had to complete a certain amount of their curriculum per week. Otherwise, they could be turned in as truant. And I got a copy of that contract, so I can provide that.
So will
the
we
next
have to
meeting.
serve meals or any of that, like lunch to these kids? If so, how would we get
They don't
that
over
to
there.
them?
They're on their own over there.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And we could probably, if we wanted to, look at that, if that was an option, we could probably put that on our route, and drop off some, drop off lunches, if that's something that we wanted to do. We could take a look at that.
Just some concerns would be behavior issues, discipline issues there on site, with the public being right there, but that is some stuff that we have to work through, which that's going to come up. So.
And one of the things that Joel and I have talked about too is we don't want it to just be the easy way out. That's not what we're after. We're after making sure that we're servicing the students in the most appropriate way possible for them to get their high school education, and for it to be rigorous and relevant, and be able to accomplish it. So there may be some differences between their ability to do things that, if they're in the alternative program versus if they are at the high school. But those are still, details that we haven't quite got worked out yet.
And Diane Harmon's room started out as basically at risk. Kids go in there to get help on their work. Now we start putting credit recovery kids in there, which has been fine, but her enrollment has increased, pretty good every period throughout the day. So it's kind of getting to that point where we need to at least look at some options.
Good questions. Other questions or concerns or comments?
Would you guys want to implement this next year?
If
like
possible.
The next school year?
Yeah, if possible. I think that would ideally be the case. Obviously, I think probably one of the biggest hurdles is making sure that we have it staffed with the right people.
Right.
That's probably going to be number one priority, to make sure that staffing is there. I say it all the time. It only works because of the staff that's working with them. So, whether that be in a regular classroom or in an ITV classroom or something like this. So that'll be really important.
Would these kids be able to get to participate in any extracurricular activities, or is that still a no with that program?
I think that's something we haven't quite got ironed out yet.
Is this for our district students only?
Only,
Okay.
yes. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Most kids that are going over there behind pace to graduate on time, so chances are they're not eligible for extracurriculars. But
That's my thought.
with the new state statute, that might be another hurdle too.
Right.
Which
Do you
I
hear that,
disagree with,
Jesse?
but
Yes.
Okay.
so
I think the structure of being within Joel's ability to just hop over would be great for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Those ladies do a really good job, but I know they don't have a lot of discipline structure, so
Right.
having Joel at their disposal, right there would be really nice for him to hop over for any disciplinary type stuff. So.
Yep.
Any other questions?
I'll get
Thank
more
you.
information.
Yeah,
Thanks, appreciate it. Okay, we'll move on to item 7, new business, locker room renovation update.
So I reached out to several superintendents just to say who does locker room renovations, and it was kind of crickets. Actually, I had a couple that asked me. I need names if you find people. So I went ahead and reached out to ATG. We've got a good working relationship with them. They don't do that, and so I then went to the next company that we've had a relationship with, and that was Mammoth. They actually do. So I have had a Mammoth representative out, take a look at the facilities. For the low cost of $0, they actually will send somebody out and do a 2-dimensional drawing. And I have a meeting set up later this week and next week with our primary coaches that are using those facilities, along with trying to get some students in there as well to start talking about what they would like to see that facility be. And then from there, Mammoth will go ahead and put together kind of a rough estimate of what it would cost. And then from there, Mammoth would be able to take it over as a design build bid process that would fulfill all of the bid requirements by the city of Kansas, put it out to bid, and do the construction with subcontractors. So we're still in the beginning phases of that. I have submitted the paperwork to have them come back out and take a look at it. But I'm hoping to get those input meetings done so we can kind of move forward with that input from coaches and players. So, questions?
My main thing was just making sure, we got the appropriate, personnel to give the input from, coaching perspective, also the, physical education perspective as well, especially because obviously, we talked with weight room stuff as well, and just even looking big picture too at what that looks like if, time comes when we do work all of that out. So.
Yeah, and we went through, I say 3 spaces, there's technically 4 locker rooms, but we went through all of them with Mammoth. And so we'll really kind of look at all 4, both the east and west underneath the bleachers, and then the 2 areas that are, I say newer, but I think they were built just after Dean graduated high school is what he kind of told me. So so we're looking at all of that, and then kind of deciding what we can fit into our budget at that point in time.
Thank you for your work on the video. It's very eye-opening, very good. So, who did you guys submit that to?
Holman Family Foundation.
Do you guys have any idea when you'll hear? Okay. So we need to make sure and get you involved. I think Thursday is when we're supposed to meet with the coaches. So, okay.
Definitely. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. No other questions. We'll move on to B, request for bid for the Roosevelt roof.
So again, back to the bid process is a big project. I have reached out to a company called DCS. There's all kinds of letters. DCS. This company is coming out a week from today to walk the Roosevelt building with me, and then begin the process of the design build bid process, where they will put together the RFQ, put it out to bid, help us with the bid process, kind of like we did with ESP to redo the controls for the whole buildings. They'll help us with that project, walk through the bid process. They'll put it out to bid to multiple different companies, and then we'll work through a rubric that will then get us the best quality for the price. So it's not just simply we get just one bid, we'll get multiple bids, and then we'll be able to disseminate that down from there. And so working with a company that has connections to different roofing companies, as well as a roofing company that we've worked with in the past in Great Bend, we can also reach out to them to give local people the opportunity to bid on it as well. So I'm hoping by the March board meeting, we'll be pretty far along in that process.
Any questions? Right. Item C, modification of board policy, DH.
So DH, as you see it, is what DH was. And then the red, the cross out, eliminates the clerk, the deputy clerk, and the superintendent as employees that need to be bonded. State statute covers those under our liability insurance, and that is taken care of within our liability insurance. I did check on that. But the treasurer by state statute needs to be bonded. And so we have already purchased a $100,000 bond on Taylor as our treasurer that will carry out for a 3-year cycle. Even in the event, I know that position has had a little bit of a turnover, even in the event that takes place, which I hope doesn't, I'm just saying that out loud, but even if the event that takes place, it will carry on to the next person. So even if it's, halfway through, it'll carry, that $100,000 bond will carry over to the next person. And so we just went ahead and bought it for $100,000. I believe it cost us like $396 as a district.
You said that's a 3-year bond?
That's a 3-year bond. And then the change in the policy, DH moves that clerk, deputy clerk, and superintendent down to the positions that may be purchased by the board if for district employees as followed. So may be purchased as opposed to required. Does that make sense to everybody? Mm-hmm. Okay. This is a first reading. Nothing needs to take place at this point in time. It'll be back on the agenda next month in old business for the final read and vote.
Move on to item 8, reports. We'll start with superintendent.
Okay. Sorry, thought I had it all pulled up here. There we go. Okay, so the first thing is I have submitted that position 4, 5, and 6 will be up for election. Currently, that is Sarah, Tracy, and Neil. Neil will be on the ballot again because he was filling an unexpired term. The deadline for refiling for Board of Education is June 1. So those positions will be on, I believe, a November ballot, and then we'll take office next January. So that would be, filing deadline. We'll talk about that a couple times between now and then. Currently, we're in the process of collecting information to get the middle school freezer, condenser unit, and evaporator unit for the middle school freezer replaced. Currently have a bid from P1 for $18,185 to do that. I want to make sure that the board is aware of that. It's under a $20,000 threshold, but I do want the board to know about that it is a considerable cost. Part of that will probably be paid for out of food service since that is 100% used for our food service program. And then the rest of it will come out of capital outlay whenever we get that finalized. We're looking for bids to come in from Comfort Pro and A&F if A&F is able to bid on that as well.
How much do you think we can take from food service?
I think we could probably do half. I mean, we could probably do like 95%, but I don't think that we have the fluid funds to do that.
Okay.
This past week, I attended both the Greenbush Winter Summit as well as our mid-season or mid-year meeting for our property and casualty insurance. Currently, right now, for the property and casualty insurance, they're looking at a 3 to 5% increase with the hopes that maybe it will be less than that, but we're anticipating that 3 to 5% increase. I'll be honest with you, it's much better than the 30 to 50% increases that I'm hearing from other districts that are not part of that group. The largest usage within, the largest claim usage within the pool is auto right now. So we just want to make sure that we're being diligent with vehicles. That pool also increased 51 districts over the past year. So that's been a huge bump, over this past year, and it's currently at 149 districts. So right at half of the districts in the state. And then I will attend a May renewal meeting, and that's when I'll actually get the actual renewal notice at that meeting in May. At the Greenbush Winter Summit, we had KSDE Commissioner Dr. Randy Watson in attendance. Some of you are at KASB and were able to see Dr. Watson. He will be coming to the district on March 4th from 12:30 to 1:30 to spend some time in the district. So I'm hoping to spend just a little bit of time here and then actually get him out to one of the buildings to show him some of the great things that we've got going on. Then one of our other keynotes was Trooper Dan from the Kansas Highway Patrol. He had a great story on how education changed his life in Michigan where he grew up. And so he's one of the people I'd really like to see come to our district and speak. So we'll see if we can make that work. Currently, Jordan and I are watching training from KSDE on food service management company request for proposals. I know that sounds super exciting for everybody, but we want to make sure that we go through the bid process this spring in a timely fashion and set up our 5-year agreement with our food service management company. And then finally, some of you may have heard in the news that there were federal education funds on a freeze. There was an injunction made that we are glad that injunction was made. It would not affect a huge chunk of our money, but we do receive about $200,000 in federal funds that would have been affected in that freeze if they would have went forward with that. So a lot of that, $140,000 of that is used on a monthly basis for salaries. So that injunction kept that freeze from happening, and so we have continued to receive those monies, as well as Kansas State Department of Education has also put some things into place to help us continue to get those monies as well. So we don't think that it'll affect us. Again, I know Great Bend said that it would have affected them. It probably would have affected them more significantly than it would have affected us, just because of the funding streams that come through that. So at this point in time, that's all I have.
Okay. Any board member reports?
So the one thing I would encourage you as board members is to engage our legislators. Dr. Brantley has been very active. She is on the education committee, both education funding committee as well as education committee as a whole. So that's a great thing to have. I would also encourage you to keep an eye on some of the bills currently. I believe it's House Bill 75 that is currently out there. It is a voucher bill that is cloaked in a tax bill. So what basically is happening is they know that when we say vouchers, that does not go over very well, and people don't like that. But everybody loves getting an income tax return. So if you send your child to a accredited, so any entity can accredit this institution, an accredited private school, you can get up to $8,000 in income tax credit by the state of Kansas. If it is a non-accredited, which is anything from a small private school all the way to a home school, you can get up to $4,000 in income tax credit. So it's all in how they're packaging it whenever it comes to these vouchers. They're really vouchers for allow public funds to be used on private education is the issue. There's no oversight. There's no reporting on how the usage of the money is going. There's no accountability on how that money is being utilized whenever it gets to. It does not necessarily have to go to the institution. So those are things that are concerns. The other part of it is about $125 million that would come out of the state general fund and not be available for public education. So, but again, there's no oversight. The amount of reports that I and other superintendents and other district personnel fill out ensure that we're using those funds where they're supposed to be used, and there's none of that whenever it comes to these vouchers. So, okay, I'll get off that one. Did have a couple of questions about that earlier today. So check out KASB's Facebook page as well as their podcast. Every day and every week they have information come out from the house.
That's why it's gonna word it that way. All right, sorry about that.
All right, we will go to item 9, consideration of district personnel. I move we go into executive session for 30 minutes pursuant to discussing non-elected personnel under the KOMA exception for the purpose of discussing nominations and resignations in personnel with Mr. Crowdis present, with others to be called as needed. Board we will return at 8:23.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Yes.
Okay, passes 6-0. Thank you guys for coming. You don't have to stick around. I know your hour's almost up.
She's not gonna make you wait 7 minutes.
Yeah.
Hey, let's do the
And if you didn't sign your names up.
Oh, yeah.
And that's 18. Okay, coming out of executive session with the following motion. I move to accept the nomination of John Ross for the position of high school math as presented.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Yeah.
Passes 6-0. Okay, so I move we go into executive session for 30 minutes. Actually, no, an hour. Pursuant to discussing superintendent evaluation with Mr. Crowdis to be called in at a later time. And the meeting will resume at 9:36.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Yes.
Passes 6-0.
Won't it still be for non-elected personnel?
Yeah, but
I mean, I don't know if superintendent evaluation is one of
Okay,
the.
non-elected
non-elected
personnel.
personnel for the
For the
purpose
For the
of
purpose
talking
of
about.
discussing.
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
Thank you. For the purpose of discussing superintendent evaluation.
Got it.
Sound good? All right. Thank you, guys. You know, gel.
Yep.
Learn to play as a team.
What?
I was gonna say, you need glasses.
I do. I got a new prescription, but I ain't getting it yet.
It's okay. Just so you know, it's writing on.
Fuzzy. No, it says Kansas.
I wouldn't be able to read it.
No, coming out of executive
number.
session with no motions, I guess. Except I move to adjourn.
Second.
Heard.
Fourth, fifth, all in favor of adjourning? Sorry.
Yes.
Okay, this is 6-0. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.